How's it going, everyone? This is P3D HEEM, and I'm signing in, and I kind of want to do a serious video today. Just a little bit of my thoughts about the interplay between F3D and P3D. I've noticed that the majority of my last videos have been hyper shilling both of the projects, and that's not necessarily good for newer investors or newer people that's looking into these particular contracts. Furthermore, I've kind of gotten away from actually discussing the math, discussing ideas about things, and I've gotten into the point to where I started making a lot of jokey style videos. Now, they were entertaining to some people, but I feel as though that can detract from the overall message I'm trying to send with this particular channel. I'm still going to continue doing some of that. I'm going to inject some of my humor throughout some of these videos, but I do want to take on a slightly more serious tone when I'm discussing things of this nature, so that these videos can be shared and so that they can be a wealth of knowledge. And this video will be kind of long. I think there's 6 slides throughout the course of this video. I can attach it as a PDF to this YouTube comments section if you are wanting that. If not, then just look at the video. So today we're going to be talking about the interplay between F3D and P3D. I think this is a very, very key relationship that a lot of people aren't necessarily looking into or talking about. They're talking about the 2 separate contracts as 2 separate entities, and I don't think that's necessarily the right way to go about it. Just talking about P3D discounts a lot of the things that F3D brings to it, and just talking about F3D discounts a lot of things P3D brings to it. So today I'm going to get into it, but first let me go through a couple of facts so that I'm not just straight up lying to you guys. I want you to know a background about how I came to some of these conclusions, how I got some of these numbers, and how I got some of these ideas. So the first particular fact that I want to talk about is that I'm making assumptions about the key price versus the Ethereum contract. Well, I've asked some of the developers. They're kind of secretive about the scaling of their keys, and I'm not entirely sure if it's linearly, logarithmic, exponential, or anything of the sort. So I'm kind of making assumptions as I go along, and you'll see what those assumptions are later in this video. A large amount of this information is based on opinion that I was able to form over time, playing both test nets, also doing the live streams, talking to people and interacting with people, and also playing both F3D and P3D and seeing how it works out. And the final fact, a significant portion of what is presented comes from speaking with some of the developers. I've spoken with Inventor at length over private message, and also I've spoken with some of the other devs in the 20+ level chat of the Discord, and I've also looked at some of the chat in the general, and also I've gotten an overall sentiment of the people playing the game, the developers, and everybody, and I've kind of put it together and built a lot of these theories that I will be presenting throughout today. So let's just do a short synopsis of the P3D and F3D relationship, what P3D is and what F3D is, because if you're a newer person investing in this, I just want you to be on the same page. So a lot of the lingo that I use won't go over your head, and so that you have a base of knowledge that I can start to build off on. So first and foremost, P3D is a dividend earning asset. When you have P3D, you generate both Ethereum, and you also have price appreciation and also depreciation. But if we're looking at it purely from the dividend aspect, every time there's a buy, a sell, or transfer, 10% is taken out and is given to P3D holders as a dividend. And the more tokens you have, of course, the more dividends you get. And that is kind of what's driving the price of the P3D. More people want it because you get more dividends from it. And as you drive the price, as you drive the amount of keys that's being purchased, the price goes up, which also induces another level of Fomo into which more people are buying it. Now we're going to talk about a little bit later why that's been stagnating and why F3D is going to kind of change that. So F3D is similar in its own right. Owning keys generates Ethereum, but in this case, only on buys do you get Ethereum. And also when you do master nodes, when somebody uses your node, you get 10% of however much ETH that they used. So it can be a lot more lucrative as a platform owning the F3D, that is, because you are the sole beneficiary of that 10% dividend. When you're looking at P3D, unless you have a very large amount of tokens, you will not get much more than 1%. However, because F3D is also putting into the contract, it plays with P3D. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, F3D is also a jackpot style game. Now, this is what's going to induce the FOMO in the later rounds because the last user gets a very large portion of the pot. I've seen a lot of numbers thrown around. I think 48% is closest to what the final person gets. And generally, I think that's what people are going to be quoting in the future. And the difference between 48% and 50% is minuscule when we get to those very large numbers, right? And finally, the remaining Ethereum that's in these contracts that you see. If you go to x6scam.me right now, you'll see roughly 215 Ethereum in that particular contract. That Ethereum, the remaining 52%, is allocated to P3D and F3D holders, depending on how the Ethereum is allocated in between the different teams. Snakes give the majority of their Ethereum back to P3D holders, and I believe what is it, either Wells, yeah, I think it's Wells that give the large portion back of it to F3D, but I'll have to look at that one more time. Of course, you can look at the tooltips and it can kind of guide you through that in case I'm saying anything erroneous. So now that everybody's on the same page about what P3D is and what F3D is, we can start talking about what F3D is as a platform and how it's going to revolutionize how people think about the P3D platform. So if you look at the overview of F3D, there's two different game types. If you played testnet 1 or if you played testnet 2, you would notice that there were two different styles that you could play the games. So if you looked at the fast style that we saw with the testnets, that had a 90-second clock, and every time somebody bought, you added, I believe, 5 to 10 seconds to that clock. It was kind of funky because of the way that it was actually going through. As far as the transactions, the clock reset pretty quickly. And it was designed to scale very rapidly in hopes that the rounds would be anywhere from minutes to at most days. This is directly from Inventor. They ran this multiple iterations, so they more or less know about how long it would last. And because it scales a lot quicker, we're expected to see a lot faster growth of the jackpot. And because we're seeing a faster growth of the jackpot, the keys are also expected to increase in price very quickly. And now I think these rounds, based on some of the interactions I've had with the developers and seeing it live, I think these rounds will last anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes at most, because I believe the keys will start to outprice a lot of the people very quickly. And this is very conducive to doing live streams, playing while you're on the toilet, playing while you're in the car in traffic. It's that type of game. And we'll talk about why this is important later. Next, we want to talk about the slow P3D. Now, this is a 24-hour clock. Every time somebody buys, you add 30 seconds to that clock. Now, speaking with Inventor, he was stating that the initial phases of FOMO, the difference between the first ETH that's put in and the 100th ETH that is put in is very little. So we can expect to see that the scaling that's used in the traditional P3D platform or the clone platform is a little bit different. The keys scale very slowly. So it's designed to scale that way so that at 10,000 ETH in the round, keys will be roughly 88 cents at today's prices, or assuming that Ethereum is roughly $500 if you're watching this video in the future. Now, because they appreciate so slowly, we assume that this will go on for a very long period of time. And I think their goal is to have both the slow and the fast occurring simultaneously, so that you can play multiple rounds of the fast F3D version while the slow F3D version is going on. And if that is a possibility, then we are increasing the dividends twofold to both the F3D platforms as well as the P3D holders. And that's a good paradigm, because if we have the slow going for very long periods of time, we're number one bringing a lot of exposure to F3D as that clock starts going down to that 12-hour mark, or as the ETH gets up to that 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 ETH mark, who knows? We're going to see a lot of people start to talk about it. And I do believe we will get news coverage from major outlets when we get to numbers as high as 100,000, because you have to think that's millions of dollars that are on the line for still $1 to $2 buy-ins, right? So if you think about it in that particular sense, there's no way you can disregard the contract anymore. And because you can interact with the contract directly, there's no amount of DDoS attacks that can take it down. As long as the Ethereum blockchain is fungible, as long as it's working, this is going to be out there. And I think that over time, this is going to bring an increasing amount of attention to the P3D F3D ecosystem. So let's just talk about the importance of F3D. So these two time periods, as I stated before, if they're able to exist simultaneously, we will increase the long-term viability of P3D because we have stable earnings over time. Now, I failed to mention this last time, but as long as the long contract is going on, those dividends and that ETH from that contract are given back to the P3D holders, right? And this also is a less risky proposition. You can get in relatively early. Anything below 500 ETH is what I'm thinking as far as the early game. As long as you get in before that 500 ETH mark, you're going to make a lot in dividends. There is no way that human greed would allow somebody to just win $100,000 for less than 50 cents. Now, let's think about that. At 10,000 ETH in the contract, if the keys are 88 cents at today's prices, that is roughly 4,800 ETH that somebody would win for less than $1. If you think that's going to happen, you are sadly mistaken. So I do believe the long game is a lot riskier of a endeavor, but I'm not a financial advisor. This is just my opinion. If we look at the short game, it provides a vehicle to quickly increase ETH. Now, this carries a lot more risk, but you can play multiple iterations of this very, very quickly. This also increases the amount of Ethereum that's given back to the P3D holders. Because the games are happening so quickly, we can expect that there will be a large amount of volatility in the P3D contract. And the most important thing of both of these contracts is the pot carryover. So each time an iteration of this goes through, the pot is increased by 10 to 25% depending on the team that was chosen. So this is not going to take too much, like as far as the long game, this is not going to affect it as much. But if you think about 10% of a million, you're already starting with a $100,000 pot. But that is a little bit farther down the road. As far as the short term, 10 to 25% on very short gameplay of the shorter contract, the minute and 30-second contract, that is going to, it's going to be an exponential increase in the amount of attraction for the short game, right? So I think all of these things combined make a sort of a loop, if you will. And if you look at the F3D cycle, there's three very distinct phases of this particular cycle that are very important. So you have the initial Fomo stage with the long game. As I stated before, this is anything below maybe 500 ETH, where people are really buying in droves because this is quote unquote very cheap keys and they're expecting to get a lot of money back as far as dividends. And they're doing a lot of shilling at this point so that they can get those masternode earnings so that they can get their rate of return a lot quicker. After that initial Fomo phase, there's a longer period of consolidation phase. I believe at this point, there will only be enough buys in order to maintain the 24-hour clock. Now, this can go for weeks, months, however long, but this will still provide some type of volatility for P3D. And this is all the long game I'm talking about right now. And then you have the secondary Fomo phase. This is when the keys start to become very expensive and people have to start making life decisions about buying these keys, having to take out loans, you know, get rid of their retirement money and whatnot. But this secondary Fomo stage is when the contract, the long contract that is, gets below that 5 to 6 hour mark where people are watching it like a hawk. I do believe that this is going to be a lot of Ethereum in the contract at this particular point. And if there's not a lot of Ethereum in the contract at this point, then I'm not entirely sure of who let somebody win all of that money with so little. But if you look at this from the fast point of view, all of this is happening at a much quicker rate. So because you're reducing that 24-hour window down to 90 seconds, that initial Fomo stage will be consisting of the ICO stage, where all of the keys are having about the same average buy-in. The consolidation phase is almost depleted, so you'll start to see the initial Fomo stage morph into the secondary Fomo stage because of the quickened rounds. And I think that the cycle will just keep repeating over and over and over because there will always be interest in F3D because of the pot carryover system that I talked about before. The pot carryover system ensures that there will always be somebody playing these games. Even if the interest drops by like 50%, if you carry over $100,000, you're starting with $10,000 in the next game, right? I'm sure there's at least 100 people that will want to fight it out for $10,000 if they only have to put up a couple pennies. So that's just my opinion on that one. But this is, I think, is the defining cycle for F3D. There may be some other opinions about this, but this is how I see it. Now, finally, I want to talk about why it's important to buy P3D. And this is all based upon the assumptions that I made about F3D before and all of the pros that I made about F3D before. So number one, you have sustained dividends from both versions of the F3D contract. From the long version, you have sustained dividends. So however many ETH it takes to maintain that 24-hour clock in a day is the bare minimum amount of volatility that you will see coming into that P3D. Furthermore, with the fast contract, you will expect to see a lot of volatility coming in and out as people, which I'm assuming are going to start selling some of their P3D in order to get an F3D to kind of flip it. And it's just going to be a repeating cycle. So any type of volatility, you're making money. So I do believe the long and the short contract in combination with P3D will have sustained dividends over the long term and will provide long-term viability. Also, we'll see the amount of investors increase, right? When you start to talk about P3D, the more serious investors, the ones who's trying to minimize the amount of risk that they're taking, they're going to start buying up more P3D. Now that there's sustained dividends, now that it's no longer a zero-sum game in P3D, that is, it's a lot less risky than it was before. Before, we had to fall back on people's interest in the contract, which waned both when the gas prices went through the roof and also through the large amount of clone wars. Anybody could just copy and paste P3D and make a new ground floor. Now with F3D coming into it, we have volatility that's always going to be there, right? So this also allows us to not have to rely on the contract just going up to get investors' interest, right? So we no longer require that particular faith, because when P3D is falling, we see the memes, hodl, hold, but over time it starts to wear on your soul. We can start seeing so many games in so many other places. I think now because of F3D, we no longer need to have that despair phase that we were facing before, where we dropped from 20,000 ETH all the way down to roughly 4,300. And this is the most important fact that I want to talk about. No clone that I know of, no developer that I know of, not one person in this space that I know of can duplicate or approximate F3D, right? And I'm not saying that there's not skilled Solidity developers out there, but the majority of the ones that are skilled to the same degree as the ones of Team Just, they're working on other projects, much larger scale projects. They're not working on dApps. If you look at the last wave of cloners, they were almost exactly copy and paste, with the only difference being differences in the amount that's taken out. So anywhere between 5 and 25% people were just changing that particular line of the code. Furthermore, they were adding maybe little things here and there, permanent master nodes, exchanges. It's the things that they were adding were very incremental. I don't foresee anybody actually overcoming what Team Just has done with Fomo 3D. And because of that, I think that buying P3D is almost as good as buying into one of the projects you see on CoinMarketCap. There's also another project that's coming out relatively soon. I don't want to leak too many details about that, but it may make P3D a tradable asset. And if it ever gets to that point, then this is going to moon. But just to put it in context, me personally, as far as my serious investments in my portfolio, that makes up about 80% of what I have invested. The remaining 20% that I have for speculative type of investments, all of that is in P3D and F3D at this point, because I do foresee this really taking off and really doing well. And the fact that it gives dividends allows me to buy into other positions or increase my position in P3D. And when you think about it like that in tandem, it's just very, very hard to discount what P3D is, what it stands for, what F3D is, what it stands for, and all of the hard work of the developers. It is now coming into fruition. A lot of people are going to get into this. There's no way you can deny that anymore. After the first person wins that first pot, the word is going to spread like wildfire throughout the entire crypto community. But with all of that being said, I really do think that the interplay between P3D and F3D is going to make a very long-term sustainable platform that people can get into. And we're moving away from it being merely a game to almost a serious investment. And the minute that it becomes a serious investment, we're going to start seeing large amount of institutional buyers or whale buying. And at this point, we're still at the cusp of the beginning. We had that initial run up, but like a lot of the other cryptocurrencies today, after that January pump, they're all kind of flattening out. We are seeing that the P3D is starting to see very, very strong signs of recovery. And it would kind of behoove you to get into either P3D or F3D, or at least look at the contract, look at the gameplay, look at other people's videos, just to know what's going on, right? So with all of that being said, this is P3D HEEM. I hope this video was informative. I hope sharing some of my opinions about some of this thing kind of makes the picture a little bit clearer about what P3D is going to do, about how long it's going to last, about what F3D brings to the table. And that's pretty much the end of the video, man. I appreciate you guys for staying this long. Please hit me with that thumbs up, subscribe to me if you haven't, and also I will be putting my Masternode links in the description. Now, this is no pressure for you to use it. I really do enjoy making some of these videos for both F3D and P3D, but any support is greatly appreciated, man. And I'm gonna sign out. I hope you guys have a great one. Peace. Hey guys, if you want all of the latest news concerning Fomo 3D, or if you like the video that you just watched, please leave a like, or please subscribe to my channel. This will help me help you. Peace.